Welcome to Face to Face. This is a show about change and about what's next. It's a show that wants to ask questions, peel back the layers of our average everyday experience, and go beyond scratching the surface. We interview amazing people with incredible ideas and stories who have done wild, weird, and wonderful things. Remember that imagination shared creates collaboration, and collaboration creates community, and community inspires social change. I'm David Peck, and this is Face to Face. So my next conversation, I had a blast with Joanna and Orlando, the producer and the director of the new film called The White Helmets. I was almost going to just call it White Helmets, but The White Helmets. Just released on Netflix. You're going to hear more about these guys. They've been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. They're a small group, I guess. The film is about a small group of, volunteer heroes, I guess you could say, and what they're up to in Syria and how they're saving lives and how they're pushing back socially and politically. And we talk about a great deal of things in this interview, and I think the conversation almost went on as long as the film does. It's a 40-minute film, and like I said, check it out. It's online now. It's on Netflix. You're going to love it. It's like nothing you've ever seen before, and it is going to, I think, raise some questions for you. It humanizes the Syrian crisis in a way that I haven't quite seen before. It's The White Helmets, and we're having a conversation here today on rabble.ca about it. davidpecklive.com for more information about my speaking and my book, Real Change is Incremental. Wait for it. Conversation coming up with Joanna and Orlando about their new film, The White Helmets. Well, welcome to Face to Face. We're joined once again by a couple of very special guests here at the Toronto International Film Festival, here to talk about their film, White Helmets, and also an organization, which I think we're probably going to talk a little bit about as well. Thanks for both of you for joining us. Why don't you do a quick introduction, and then maybe one of you or both of you tell us a tiny bit about the film. And premiering in Shortcuts, is that right? Yes.
That's right, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm Orlando von Einsiedel. I directed the film.
And hi, I'm Joanna Natasegara. I'm the producer of White Helmets.
So give our listeners, I can do it, but I'm going to ask you to do it instead. Give us the overview of the 21 minutes?
40 minutes.
Sorry, 40 minutes.
No, don't worry.
Yeah.
Okay, it's The White Helmets is a film about real heroes. It's about ordinary Syrian civilians just like you or me who every day wake up and risk their lives by running into the smoke and fire after an airstrike, and they pull out and save the lives of complete strangers.
So it's about real heroes. I mean, it's to say that it's inspirational, I think, is an understatement, really. And I think what it does for me too is it humanizes a problem that's been so we've been so disconnected from in so many. And people that I hang out with, if the Middle East does come up, it's kind of, well, no one really understands that anyway. There's always this sort of, it's kind of brushed under the table, right, or under the carpet, which is even worse, frankly. So I love the way you have humanized such a profound, tragic problem.
I mean, I think. Thank you. I think what you're saying is one of the main things which drew us to this story. You're right. Syria, especially, it's so hard to engage with. It's so sad. It's so tragic. But these guys, the White Helmets, who can argue with people just trying to save innocent lives? And I mean, that's what drew us to this story. It's the story in Syria has been dominated by ISIS and by the refugee crisis, and those are clearly important stories. But this story is a story of hope, and it's also a story which brings the focus back to what the millions of Syrian civilians go through every day, and that is running for their lives from the bombs chucked out of airplanes by the Assad regime and its allies.
How do you get pulled into a story like this? Is it an email? Have you seen the film Silvered Water, for instance? A very interesting Syrian film that was a filmmaker who was in exile in France, and someone connected with him in Aleppo. This is 2 or 3 years old on Facebook. He ends up directing her as the DOP on the ground. Fascinating. And had Facebook not existed, maybe the film wouldn't have been made. Right. And it's a difficult, tragic film. There's little bits and pieces of that I see in yours as well, or at least the story, I should say. Yeah. So how did it start? Is it an email? Is it a?
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, I mean, and you're right. Often stories find you, but with this one, we saw the footage of the baby that gets pulled out, the very famous rescue of the miracle baby. How can you not be moved by that? This baby is less than a month old. And that just really drew us to tell this story, which in some ways is a continuation of the work that we did in Virunga. We were looking at African civil servants. Here we're looking at civilian volunteers on the ground in Syria. So I think the interesting thing about what you're saying is we certainly see this as a kind of collaboration. We were not on the ground filming in Syria. We very much used the footage, the work of the White Helmets themselves that take all the risk on the ground, collecting this footage of their own rescues, and then we worked with them to film in Turkey when they're in relative safety, getting extra training for the work that they do. And the work is really the amalgamation of those two kinds of footage.
So just to be clear, because I kind of smiled / laughed out loud when I saw the cinematographers listed at the credits. It's the 3 guys you interview, isn't it, essentially? Or 2 of them, maybe?
No,
oh, it's not. Oh, I thought it was.
So
I thought, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Because there's so much handheld, right?
Similar names.
Yes, but there's so much handheld footage. I just, I thought maybe the guys had, I don't know, GoPros as they were.
Khaled is, they do have GoPros, and
Wow.
Khaled, the key cinematographer is a White Helmet, but the other 2 are his collaborators. So, but our DOP spent a long time with Khaled on the ground in Turkey, really honing his skills. He already had a lot of skills, but he's only 21.
Wow. So did you have to collect any of that footage elsewhere, or was that all from your contacts? Because there's some astounding footage in the film. There really is.
I mean, I think there's a news piece or 2 in the film, but other than that, the footage was filmed by Khaled Khatib, his 2 colleagues, and then maybe another 10% was from the wider archive of the White Helmets themselves.
How did anyone not die in that establishing shot?
I mean, the tragedy of this situation is that the White Helmets, they are killed with horrendous frequency. 140 of them have died in the last few years. The Washington Post recently called what they do the most dangerous job in the world.
Interesting. I thought an accountant on Wall Street was the most dangerous job in the world. Yeah.
Not anymore.
Not anymore, that's right. They've been bumped to number 2, yes. I think, for me, what is it that compels somebody? I mean, I teach in international development, as my listeners know, and every year I have 65 students who want to change the world, and I want to change the world, and I believe in the splash and ripple effect and all those things. What is it that motivates somebody like these White Helmets to do what they do? I mean, there's some of the line, it's my obligation, it's my duty, they say. Why?
I think it's a really good question. I think me and Joanna have asked ourselves, would we do the same? Right. If a war like what's happened in Syria was in London or New York or here in Toronto, would we risk our lives? Would we flee, or would we stay and every day wake up and try and save strangers? And I really hope that I would, but I just don't know. I mean, what these guys do is extraordinary. And I think one of the most moving moments in making this film is when we were in Turkey. These guys, they were there for 5 weeks, and at any point they could have left. They could have gone to complete safety, and they couldn't wait to get back. And the day they left, not a single one was in doubt. They all got back in that coach and they drove across the border, and the next day they were doing the exact same work again. And it was a very emotional moment for us, because these were people that we became very good friends with. But also it just shows how extraordinary.
Well, there's a sense in which, and I just thought of it now, that there's an anticipation that comes out in some of the footage. They can't wait to get out there to save lives, which I guess is what you want to do if you've got somebody coming to help you out of bombed out rubble. You want them to be acting quickly, right?
Yeah.
But there's an energy there. There's a passion. There's a level of commitment to this that's astounding.
Yeah, I mean, I think the sheer level of compassion that these guys have
great. Yeah.
is just wonderful. I mean, there's a scene in the film where Abu Ammar talks about that, and he talks about the sheer joy of saving life.
Right.
And that, in response to this death and destruction, just saving that one life, which is of course their motto. But he talks about it on a very personal level and how that makes him feel. I suppose if you're going to be addicted to something, that's possibly the best thing to want to keep doing over and over again. So, and I think that's where they get their energy from. Every time they pull a child out of the rubble and know that child is going to live, it gets them up the next day to do it again.
You don't have to turn to too many news channels to hear a lot of anti-Muslim rhetoric, it seems to me, and his name rhymes with dump, and that's probably that's kind of an interesting way to sort of put it out there. But it's not just Trump. I mean, it's all over, right? It really is all over, and it's I think, for me anyway, you've put a really beautiful human face again on, and there's really no other face you can put on it on Islam. Is that a fair statement? I mean, was that really intentional, or did that just kind of play out as you started to edit the film? I
think we can talk about that separately. I mean, certainly I have a degree in Indian religions and had studied Quranic Arabic, so I was expecting to, a much broader picture of Islam, understood that it could be that kind of driver, and certainly we found that faith was a real driver for them. These were very religious men.
Yeah.
The most gentle form of that faith, which actually motivated them to do this work. Their motto, to save one life, is to save all of humanity, is a Quranic phrase.
Which is so great. I didn't know that, but what a great phrase, right? I mean, that should be on everyone's T-shirt, right?
It should, yeah.
And everyone's bumper.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think Orlando can speak to that too.
I mean, unlike Joanna, I'd spent a lot less time working in the Middle East, and maybe I did come to this with some ideas about what it might be like and what these guys might be like, but what we found were a group of very gentle, very humble guys, and also guys with real hope despite everything that they've been through.
Yeah, I mean, it's so easy to just sort of, what's the word I'm looking for here? Kind of acquiesce towards the status quo in a sense of our understanding of others. And I've spent a lot of time overseas, and once you're on the ground, things change, right? Once you've got real face-to-face contact, once you have, forget about, maybe Skype is good. But boy, there's nothing quite like sitting down and having a coffee with somebody from another culture, from another place. It changes everything.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose just to come back to your question, did we want to try and show, these Muslim guys in a particularly positive light? I mean, that was just a product of filming with them. It wasn't something that we set out to, and we edited in a way to make them look better. No, I mean, what you see in that film is how they are.
Yeah, well, how could you not make them look good? And I think you're right. The compassion really comes out in the interview footage you have with these guys. And I got to say, so many moments in it I loved, but one of my favorite lines is, and I don't know who it was, but somebody said, "Get me a crowbar, I need to look under the mattress." How utterly absurd, right? Absurd. I mean, it makes sense in the context of what the heck, a barrel bomb has just landed or whatever. It makes perfect sense, but it's just utterly absurd.
Yeah, I mean, so much of the footage that we saw, we couldn't show. So much, more of that compassion. So many of the stories they told us about their rescues. I mean, there's one that really stands out with Hikmat, who's actually not a main character in the film, but he sort of talks to us halfway through filming about how they don't just pull out the living, which are of course the most inspiring stories, but they bury the dead.
Right.
They physically bury the dead, and the level of compassion that it takes to to take that person back to their family, and to let that family begin to grieve for that person, and then go and physically dig a grave and bury that person, is just something I can't conceive of. I mean, really not.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in a way, you'd like, to your comment earlier about you'd like to think that you would do the same. But you know, there's a guy. You know, here I was down on King Street the other day, and there's a guy sitting in front of the Starbucks next to the Industry Center at the festival, and he's there, and, you know, begging for money, asking for money, and he's got a sign. I think I'll tell a joke for some money, and I don't think I can equate this to the bombing of Aleppo, but the tendency is to walk on by, right? The tendency is not even to make eye contact. So, but maybe in a more, I don't know, compelling or a more dangerous situation, we'd all rise to the occasion, you know? It's the kind of stuff of, you know, arguments at Christmas time are made of, you know? Sitting around the table, and one somebody will say something, you go, hang on a minute.
Well, I mean, I suppose what I can say to that is, like I said, I don't know if I would do that. I just don't know until I'm faced with it. But I can certainly say that having spent time with these guys, I'm more likely to do it because they've inspired me, and I
awesome.
really hope if there's one thing that audiences take away from this, it's that they have hope in humanity from these guys,
which is kind of crazy in a way.
Which is crazy, right?
To think that they have hope.
Agency.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the darkest of times, they have agency.
Totally,
Yeah.
and maybe people will also, you know, want to be better people themselves.
Well, and you know what's so great is in the interviews, you've really captured their the ethos, the demeanor of them as well. Like it really comes through. It comes through their skin. You can see it. You can see it in their eyes, and I mean, remarkable, really. Was that a really conscious choice too? I don't know. It just struck me near the end of the film. The interviews are so sort of symmetrical, and you know, I thought of geometry and how perfect they are, the line and the uniforms and the structure, and then bam into this crosscut with this crazy insanity. Was that an intentional choice, or?
Well, I mean, I have to.
It works really well.
I have to certainly pass credit for the geometry to our cinematographer.
Yes.
But
and the award-winning cinematographer.
I mean, award-winning, yes, he
yes,
is.
Yeah.
But in terms of the choice of having them look down the camera, that was very. I mean, you know, that was a choice we made. We felt that we wanted them to relay their story directly to the audience without going through the filter of looking off camera to an invisible director. It just felt right. Their story is so strong, they tell it so well, and we wanted to try and minimise the distance between the connection between them and the viewer.
So, is there something that they know that we don't? You know, what's the line? Without hope, what good is life?
I mean, honestly,
there is absolutely no cynicism.
No, there really isn't.
Not an ounce of cynicism.
Actually, that is absolutely true. And another thing that was interesting about them is that they maintained humour throughout. Almost to a man. These guys had a really good sense of humour, and they were very, very mindful to take care of us, weren't they? Which was just beyond ironic, really. Always concerned with our. You know, were we eating enough? Were we sleeping enough?
Right,
were we
right,
upset?
right.
You know, but you're right. You know, just totally lacking in cynicism, and I suppose that again, that's a lesson for us all. That
it really is,
yeah.
and we know it's clearly connected to the hope and maybe to the faith side of things.
Yeah.
It seems to me, you know, I mean, if you're hoping in something other and something bigger than yourself, you've got to have something like that. It seems to me driving you if you want to change the world in some significant way, because there's kind of a hubris there, right? There's kind of an ego attached to it. I mean, those guys are just responding, I suppose. Right? What else would we do? What are you, crazy? I wouldn't behave any other way. That's the sense I get from them.
I suppose the alternative is inaction, isn't it?
Right,
Which is untenable in that situation. You can't sit around and do nothing and watch it happen. That's not an appropriate response, in any way. So I suppose they feel this is the only appropriate response.
I don't know who it was who said it, but camera, I don't know where the camera was at this point, but somebody was moving in and said, people who laughed out loud, people who are not doing anything, please leave. Right? And I couldn't help but think that this was like, I don't know, again, intentional. Most editorial choices are pretty intentional. almost like this is the on the white sign out in front of the theater, right? If you're not interested in action, then get the hell out of here. Like, we don't even want you in the audience. Thanks very much. You know what I mean? That's maybe not exactly what you wanted to say, but that's kind of where I went.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't think I've got much to add, but.
So get the hell out is sort of the message, really, of White Helmets. Yeah.
We're hoping it's get the hell in. And,
get the hell in, absolutely, yeah. So has the madness of the festival begun for you guys yet? You've been here a couple of days, and
well, we have this film. We have a very short festival run. We were in Telluride last week for our world premiere. This week we're here in Toronto, and then very excitingly on Friday, on the 16th of September, we launch on Netflix.
Nice.
So, I mean, that's exciting for us because this film will get seen in 190 countries in 83 million households. And, that for us was a big decision in working with Netflix. It was to get this story to as wide an audience as possible. And, we're excited for the world to see these guys, and hopefully they'll feel the same way.
Can I ask a couple more questions? The white helmets, obviously conscious choice, and you guys probably didn't have anything to do with the actual color of the helmets, but is this their response to the inefficacy of the blue helmets?
Oh, I wouldn't want to speak.
Unfair question. Really,
I mean, actually, I think they needed helmets. I think the actual real story is that somebody sent them helmets and they were the cheapest ones.
Right.
I think that's the actual.
Right.
The actual.
Well,
truth.
it's such a great metaphor for so many things, and everyone loves to lob stones at the UN, right? I mean, they really do. But I just wondered if it was one of those sort of inaction versus action kind of things again.
Well, I guess I would still say this is all about the agency of the individual.
So, can you tell us as we wrap up here a little bit about the organization? There is an action, and are they up for a Nobel Prize?
They are up for a Nobel Prize. Yes, they're up for a Nobel Prize this year, and actually just today in the New York Times it was announced there's a whole string of celebrity endorsers that are sort of saying, actually, we back these guys for the Nobel. Who else could win the Nobel?
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's really great, and we hope that this is the year of the White Helmets together with this film.
That sounds like a movement, actually. It really does, seriously.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, we got me to we behind you and the Kielburgers or something along those lines, and all of a sudden you're getting this out into a whole other level. I mean, I could see this going into high schools and campaign. So I've spent a tiny bit of time on whitehelmets.org. Is that where we need people to go?
That is exactly where we want people to go. Whitehelmets.org, and you can support the White Helmets yourselves. If you're moved by their story in this film, you can donate money, and it's called the Hero Fund, and it's for White Helmets who've been injured in the line of duty, and the families of those who've been killed.
Can I ask one last question?
Yes,
so,
of course.
So I think it's after a particular airstrike in the film, and one of the White Helmets, I think, says in the interview that suffering of civilians has entered into a new chapter. And it might seem like a weird place to end the interview, but I hope we go in a particular way. But if that's true, I mean, why are these guys hopeful? Why are you guys hopeful, Why are you so glad that it's going to get into 190 countries around the world on Netflix?
I suppose I would leave you asking the question, what is the alternative? There is no alternative to hope. So we saw that with them. We saw it with the Rangers in Virunga, and I think we believe it as well. There is only hope.
Pretty nice way to end the interview, it seems to me. Talking to the filmmakers of White Helmets, the Canadian premiere. Catch it on Netflix coming up on this 16th of September. And for those of you who don't know, that is my birthday, so it is an important day. That's all I'm going to say.
Happy birthday to them.
I'll look forward to the gifts. So thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate your generosity, and congratulations on the